himself and other people. And some were children, and some were young people, and some were African American, and some were white, and some were old, and some were young. But at 5 years old, I was well versed in what nobody should be well versed in. And the part I was trying to come to grips with, plus being hurt physically, is being confused emotionally and mentally of what's going on, what happened. And he was in a rage. He was mad about something. I don't know if he'd asked me to do something and I didn't understand it and I didn't hear it, and he was a little more drunk than I would have ever been able to comprehend. I don't know what prompted it. But from that moment, life went downhill for me, because he was in a rage. He was all over me, slapping me around, cussing me, calling me all kinds of names, telling me I was worthless, I would never be worth anything. He had a partition wall down the center of that old garage where he had planned to build a wall that would divide the garage and eventually spray furniture on one side dust-free, and he would build furniture on this side. It wasn't finished yet, though. It was just a stud wall. And before he'd finished that afternoon, he had tied my hands to that stud wall. Little 5-year-old child now. Is there anybody in the room here that's 5 or 6 years old? Would you raise your hand real tall? Are you 5? You're 6. Can you come here just 1 second, honey? Because you're really pretty. I want everybody to see you. Okay. She's 6. Isn't she the cutest thing you've ever seen? 6. So that's 1 year older. Sometimes I need the benchmark from my own perspective. 6. Oh, boy, you're college age compared to where I was at 5. And before he was finished with me that afternoon at 5 years old, my hands had been tied to that stud wall. And when he'd finished his rage, and when he'd also finished with me sexually, I looked down to realize I stood in a pool of my own blood. I've said it over and over again. The movie alludes to it, that I'm not sure little children ever get over some of these things. Just as surely as you'd have taken Danny Wallace out back and buried him in my grandfather's cotton field, he couldn't have been any more dead. My heart went black. Overnight, a little 5-year-old boy became an old man. I spent my childhood trying to stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of the predator. I just wanted to survive. I just wanted to figure him out. I just wanted to always try to be out thinking him, to stay a little bit ahead. But as with every predator, and as cunning as the enemy is, just about the time you think you've got that bird figured out, he flips a switch and he goes in a different direction on you. I also, in the midst of all of those years, I married Lynn at 17. From 5 until 17, that abuse continued in one form or another. I told you when I was sharing my song that it was nothing for my dad to throw a fit, throw my food out, and take me out to where he raised hogs out at the corner at the back of our house, and tie me up to an old hog house, and I was to stay there until I ate what they ate. And oftentimes I'll have preachers say, "Brother, we want to take you out to eat. We want to take you out to eat somewhere." Shane Utley last week said, "I'm going to meet you for lunch on such and such day." He said, is Logan's okay? I said, "Shane, when you hear my story, you won't ever ask me that again. You can take me anywhere in the world." Again, I look high maintenance. I am not. I said, "Stop me at the convenience store and open up some beanie weenies." I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. If you've ever eaten with pigs, it doesn't make too much difference with you where you eat. I'm really not picky about that. Lynn can tell you in 37 years, I don't think I've ever sat down to a meal that I complained about. I'm not somebody that looks at the meal when it comes out at a restaurant and complains and whines and belly aches and sends it back to be recooked. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you order something, you're paying for it, and it wasn't cooked right, send it back. That's up to you. I'm just telling you, if you've ever eaten with pigs, it all looks good. And so you just don't get picky. And through those years, that abuse was intense. I'm going to give you this one little snippet so you'll understand just the severity and the depravity of his mind and how the enemy had my father's heart. Keep in mind, though, I'm this size. Little children don't understand and don't comprehend all of what's going on. They kick into survival mode. They get in their imagination. I had a vivid imagination. It's one reason I like to play dress up at 54. You never know what I'm going to do. But I was a little boy trapped up in here, and sometimes I just like, hey, let's just have fun. I never got to do it as a kid. It gets me in a lot of trouble in some Baptist churches, but I think I'll be safe here. I used to climb up in my grandpa's barn loft and put on a little red cape because I loved Superman, and I'd dive out of the barn loft and land in a pile of hay because I wanted to be able to fly. I think I wanted to be able to fly because, dear God, if you'll let me fly, I can fly out of here. And to this day, I still want to fly. I dream about it sometimes. I'll have the most vivid dreams of me just taking off, and I'm just soaring out across the fields, And it's so real, I really think I can. So the survival of children God places in our hearts when we're little is that vivid imagination. For me, it was survival for me. At 10 years old, though, now keep in mind that started in the garage at 5 after 5 solid years of things those are the things I can tell you about. Most of the things could never be written about, could never be spoken about. But at 10 years old, one afternoon, my dad told me that a man had given him a load of wood. And it was stored in an old barn, and if I would go with him and help him load it, I could earn some money. Maybe enough money that when my mom went to the grocery store, I could go to the drugstore next door and buy some Superman comics. So I hop in the pickup truck. We're headed out to go load this wood. It's getting dusky dark. We wound around out in the woods. If y'all think you're in the country, man, wherever it was country. And we're on this old dusty gravel road going back through the woods, and you see the big old barn in the clearing. And as we pull up there, I hop out. I go through the doors of that barn. I'm ready to get started loading this wood. Strangest feeling hit me as soon as I went through the doors of the barn. First, there was no wood in the barn. There was nothing in the barn, and it had just the old dirt floor for the barn floor. Nothing in the barn except a stained and filthy old mattress in the middle of the barn. And when I realized that I'd been tricked and what had happened, and I turned to try to leave, already I was being surrounded in a circle of about 15 or 16 big, strong men, not unlike some of you guys in here, that had paid my father at the door for a little fun with the kid. And that afternoon, in one shape, form, fashion, fetish, or another that they had in mind, when they had finished with this little 10-year-old boy, again, I distinctly remember realizing I stood in a pool of my own blood. I don't know how much the sacrifice that Jesus made at Calvary means to you. It means a lot to me. I do know what it means to shed blood. And by no means even in an ounce of comparison to what our Lord has done for us. And I will never forget it. I will tell you this. The abuse, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, I had become numb to it, and I could survive that because you could just kind of clock out. My dad had told me over and over again I was fit for nothing. I would never be anything. I would never amount to anything. The only thing I was worth was what I was being used for, and he was quick to declare that on most days you're not even very good at that. And he had told me more times than not, if you ever breathe a word of what's going on, I will see to it that you are killed and buried on this property, and it'll be years before they dig you up or find out what's happened to you. And being a little child and him being this awesome figure, I knew that was true. I knew he could get away with it. Some of y'all are sitting there wondering right now at this point, how does a man get away with such as that? Same way one or two of you in this room have gotten away with it before. How does he get away with it? Same way some of you in this room are getting away with it. How would nobody not know that he was doing this to a little boy? Same way your relative, your coworker, somebody at your school, somebody who's your best friend. Same way they're getting away with it. And you know that little bit of righteous indignation that all of a sudden just bubbled up in you, that my mere suggestion that somebody you know would do such a thing because you're waiting on that monster to come through the door? That's exactly how he got away with it. If you're waiting on a monster to come through the door, my dad was not a monster. All of my dad's life, this was the description of him. Until the day he died this past year, the week of Father's Day.